what is happening here? Why are there so many, I'm going to say, holes in the horsemanship and the human's lack of understanding of how to interact with the horse in a way that is not creating this fearful, reactive, defensive horse? I can't tell you how many times owners will pick up a horse from their trainer, from a professional, not just some backyard person, and haul their horse, whether it's across the country or wherever, to me immediately after the trainer has said, oh, this horse flipped over, oh, this horse is no good, oh, this horse is da-da-da. And what people don't realize is by the time they're often realizing, because they're thinking my horse is with the professional and I'm trusting them and this is what everybody says I should do. And so they're not really questioning the way things are done, or maybe the owner isn't educated enough to understand, or their communication isn't open enough with the professional so that the owner is kept in the loop as to what's happening and why things are happening. And so by the time they're recognizing that there's a problem going on with their horse, they often don't realize how much trauma has been, I'm going to say, trained into the horse by aggressive tactics. And what I find that often happens that people don't realize is if you have someone who I'm going to say is a competent rider, who has enough aggressiveness and ego in the way in which they ride and do things with the horse, they can often make it look okay with the horse for a long time. They can create obedience. They can create patterns to where the horse is submissive in their behaviors and compliant in their behaviors. And it can seem like to the owner who's maybe seeing some from the outside that their horse is getting trained, that this is the response that we're going for. What people don't realize is how often this contained obedience that these horses are trained to have may work with a rider who's competent or aggressive enough to force the horse to comply. The reality is when that horse then goes home to the owner who maybe has less physical abilities in the saddle or less understanding of the horse, all of that obedient containment that the horse has had pent up inside and basically built up with every single training session, quote, suddenly comes exploding out. And this is where so many times the horse that seems like it was trained and it was broke and it had done all this stuff suddenly catches people off guard and reacts in these really dramatic, dangerous behaviors. And people go, I don't understand where that came from. I mean, he just had all this training. He did so good for the trainer. We did all these different things with him. He seemed fine. Why am I all of a sudden having such a problem now? And this is my biggest problem with so many of these fearful and traumatized horses, whether it was through abuse and neglect or aggressive training methods or anything else in between, is that rarely in our Western society do we have the patience, time, and empathy to actually consider what the horse is experiencing. Rarely do we have the availability to hear the horse's opinion, and rather than try and shut it down or force compliance, do we go, wait a minute, that horse's opinion is reflecting what he's mentally and emotionally experiencing. And if I don't address it now when he's showing perhaps the initial reasonable signs of fear or reasonable signs of concern, if I don't address it now, his behaviors are going to start to escalate, the unwanted behaviors. So when people come to me and they say, well, my horse has been, started bucking all of a sudden, started bolting all of a sudden, started kicking and running me over, things he never did before, and I just don't understand it, was out of the blue, it often is never out of the blue. Often what happens is the horse will reflect in his behaviors those initial signs in a reasonable manner. And what we're taught in our society is make that horse listen, make that horse be compliant. You impose enough pressure that that horse quits resisting and he'll obey you, he'll listen to you. Put on more severe training apparatus or equipment or stronger whatever, X, Y, and Z, and this will make your horse listen. But what people don't realize is using stronger equipment is only masking the problem, and it's reinforcing that horse's fear and defensiveness. And it's escalating even more what the horse is already experiencing, which is then teaching him distrust towards any type of human communication. And this is the big problem is good intention people many times don't realize how often they are reinforcing unwanted behavior in the horse by how they're communicating, because the way so many people are taught to communicate is done in basically, you will force the horse to be obedient. He will be compliant.